Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I appreciate it. Next week is the Marine Corps birthday, which is near and dear to my heart. My husband's a veteran of the Marine Corps, and it's a big part of my story and why I'm running for office. But it's also Veterans Day next week, where we honor those who served this country. And I think it's really important to be reminded that our veterans come from every corner of this country. And in the best case scenario, they reflect all of us, that they're men, they're women, uh, straight, gay, black, white, brown, Asian, rich, poor, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jewish, non-religious, Republican, Democrat, libertarian, apolitical. And when we think about the diversity of our service, we recognize that we need to have each other's back. And so I'm grateful today to bring on three veterans with many years of experience in our military. We have the Dr. Reverend Jeffrey Rhodes, 23-year chaplain, retired commander Paul Cradwell, and a former sergeant in the Marine Corps, Jim Page, also a middle school teacher, retired. And they remind us of how important it is that our military is apolitical, and that we take care of each other. And right now we see the rise of Christian nationalism and the pull of the current administration to turn military service members and veterans against each other. And that should be really troubling to all of us. And our veterans are harmed by this. Right now we're in a government shutdown. We have veterans, about 40,000 in Michigan, going without SNAP benefits. We think about our veterans who need services, mental health services, help with post-traumatic stress. They need access to medical care. And in rural areas, this is getting increasingly more difficult. And of course, these conflicts don't make it better. So I'd like to first introduce Dr. Reverend Jeffrey Rhodes, talk about his experience. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Kelly. Sure, thank you. So I was a 23-year Navy chaplain, and I think most people know that the Navy and the Marine Corps joined at the hip. So I had 60% of my time was with the Navy and 40% of my time was with the Marine Corps. And a couple of my Navy commands were actually sea commands. I was assigned to USS Arkansas, which is a guided missile cruiser, shot Tomahawk missiles. And then I was assigned for 3 years to USS Constellation, and we tied up at North Island. And I think probably especially on board the two ships that I had, it really, really reflected the demographics of the United States. So we had people on the ship from Guatemala, Jamaica. We worked with Asian people. We worked with Black people, yellow people. It didn't matter. It really reflected the makeup of the ship, also the makeup and the demographic of the country, of the United States. So being the chaplain, in any command that I was assigned to, I reported to, the easiest way to say this would be, I reported to the command structure. The command structure would be on a Navy ship, for example, the captain, the executive officer of the ship, and then the command master chief. In the Marine Corps, with the Marine Command, it would be also the commanding officer. And for me, on a couple of commands, that was actually a general officer. Again, the executive officer, and then the sergeant major of that command. I reported to them. And what they really wanted to know from me is, what's the religious tone and tenor of my ship or of my Marine Corps unit? And when they would ask me to report that to them, and that was pretty frequent actually, because they are in charge of what we call the command religious program. When they asked me that, they didn't really care about the fact that I was a Protestant chaplain. They wanted to know about the religious tone, tenor for all of their constituents. So being a Navy chaplain, you don't just minister, in my case, to Protestants. You minister to Buddhists, to Hindus, to Muslims, to Latter-day Saints, to Wiccans, to any particular religious flavor of the constituents that were assigned to that command, and many of them did not have a religious preference. But still, my objective and what the command element held me to task for was the care of all of their service members assigned to their command. They didn't care if they were Catholic, if they were Jew, if they were Wiccan, they didn't care at all. And actually, for me, I didn't either, because the unit comes together as a cohesive unit best when all of that is left aside. Yes, there is a place for that, and in my case, during Sunday services. But what the command element is interested in, how are we working as a cohesive unit? How is everyone supporting one another regardless of religious background? And actually, that is what I was charged to do, is to make sure, to the best of my ability, that that did work on a Navy command or in a Marine Corps command. So actually, the diversity was celebrated, and it's something that makes and made the unit strong. The Navy chaplain, in my case, for ship commands, and then actually I was assigned to a Marine infantry command, is tasked with helping the morale of the unit. And by helping the morale of the unit, you do that by blending the unit as best you can and not honoring or making one denomination or one faith group higher or better than the other. Everybody comes together for one common purpose, and that's to fulfill the mission of the command. And that is best done when denominations and faith groups are left outside of that, and just the general morale of the unit is elevated.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. I just want to highlight that. And you said you work to have a cohesive unit regardless of religious background, and that absolutely impacts troop readiness. And I think when we think about the common purpose to fulfill a mission in the command, we can also think about that even now as we take care of our veterans. If we have this common goal and this common purpose, we have to recognize that our service members and our veterans reflect us and reflect the diversity of this country and how important that is. I now want to introduce the retired Navy Commander Paul Cradwell, and just want to thank him for joining us here today as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for having me. So a little bit about me. As Kelly said, I'm a retired Navy commander. I would have been a lieutenant colonel in the Marines or in the Army or the Air Force. I was in the Navy of the 22 years I served. 14 of those years I was assigned to a ship or seagoing staff. I made 9 overseas deployments in my time. Was involved in combat in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf as well. My first ship was a combat store ship out of Guam. I was navigator of a destroyer, weapons officer of a frigate. My last afloat job, I was the assistant chief engineer of the USS John C. Stennis, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. I had 2 tours as a commanding officer. I was fortunate enough to have that ability to serve, and I want to echo what Chaplain Rhodes said, that I was part of what we call the Trinity of Command: the commanding officer, the executive officer, and the command master chief. And the command master chief would be the sergeant major in the Marine Corps, and that was a senior enlisted person who I would rely on to tell me what is the pulse of the enlisted personnel. And I also had my last command tour. I was a commanding officer at Navy Reserve Center Chicago, and I had a religious ministries unit that had nothing but chaplains. I had a Catholic priest, a couple of Protestant pastors, and I had a rabbi. And we actually had a couple of Wiccans who wanted representation. So I was smiling when you said that, Chaplain Rhodes. So, and we were a very diverse group. And diversity was our strength because we pulled on what was best of everyone from around the country. And I had people literally from around the United States. I had 2 foreign nationals under my command. One of them was from the Philippines. The other one was from Mexico. So we we were just like a cross section of America, as Chaplain said, African American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, Islanders, Japanese. It ran the gamut, and diversity was our strength, not our weakness. But thank you for letting me talk about myself, Callie.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Um I even highlight, I think I took notes on your last quote. Diversity was our strength because we pulled from what was our best. And I love that. I'd now like to introduce Jim Page, veteran, served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps, retired as a sergeant, and was a middle school teacher. So thank you, Jim, for joining us.
You're welcome. Just to continue that, or just to say that, I retired with 28 years of a middle school teacher. All right. And before that, I was 6 years in the Marine Corps. So, and I was stationed everywhere from West Coast to East Coast, Camp Pendleton, Camp Delmar, Camp Pendleton, to Cherry Point in the Carolinas. And my last station, or one of my last duty stations, was in Arlington, Virginia, headquarters Marine Corps in the old Navy Annex. All right. So, and I was a personnel chief. So I did paperwork. I was a Remington Raider. So I did 6 years of paperwork and making sure everything ran accordingly. And so I had both enlisted personnel and officers that were coming up there and asking me for everything that they could get, and all the time, and trying to keep everything straight. That was my job. And that's what I did for 6 years. Never served overseas, never seen any action. Everything was peacetime, but it was still a veterans. We had to take care of each other and support each other. And I took an oath that was considered a lifetime oath to defend this country and the Constitution. And we need to stand up right now. One of the worst things that I can see is how we are treating our veterans and our current military personnel, active duty personnel. So I'm hoping that we can support them and make everything better in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate you all three being on here today with us. And I can kick it off if anyone has any follow-up questions for any of them.
I'm happy just to chime in. I wasn't sure what the kind of the decorum was. My name's Eli Newman. I'm a health reporter for Bridge, Michigan, where we have been covering the effects of the government shutdown. More acutely, I had been following issues related to SNAP benefits, which is why I wanted to talk to everybody here today to understand kind of how this shutdown is affecting the veterans community. If there are even things outside of SNAP that you'd like to highlight in terms of federal services that are maybe being hampered by everything that's going on in Washington.
So I'll start with this. One thing I can tell you, Eli, is that we have a high veteran population in this district, but even throughout the state of Michigan. And we do have veterans that do get SNAP benefits. It's about 40,000 in Michigan. And so they're not receiving those right now. I mean, of course, we've heard that we need SNAP benefits now to, from the Supreme Court, that those should go out. But of course, timing on that and how much that's actually going to be is I believe, still an open question. One thing I would point out is that concerns our veterans is we have folks who are very often proud of their service, and even to apply for SNAP benefits. I've helped veterans apply for benefits, and it's a hard thing to get them to do that because there's sometimes a lot of shame with seeking help, whether that's mental health services or help getting a meal, that sometimes it's really difficult to get folks to just, for one, ask for help. And so when we finally cross that threshold and we're able to get folks the help that they need, we see messaging and we see it on Facebook and all over the place that somehow we just have a bunch of welfare queens all over the place trying to get food, right? And that's really not the reality. And so I think often about our veterans that are kind of seeing this kind of messaging, that maybe they're not deserving of a benefit when they absolutely need it. And so that's tough, right? And I think as we have Veterans Day coming up, we should be thinking about the people who've served who absolutely need this kind of assistance.
Eli, if I can chime in briefly, that there's a VA hospital in Battle Creek close to where we have a home in Portage, Michigan. And I received an email notification that because of the government shutdown, they're suspending all but urgent care. And they're also suspending all of their mental health care right now because of the lack of funding. And that's definitely, I don't need that kind of care. But there are veterans out there who do need that kind of the mental health care. And right now, the VA is basically saying that we can't support you right now until we get the appropriations through Congress.
Thank you for that perspective, Paul. And I would certainly be interested in seeing that email. I'm happy to kind of provide my contact in the chat if you're able to send that my way, because that sounds like a pretty big deal for people who rely on those services. I had I was wondering with Chaplain Rhodes if there were given your background with kind of just providing mental health services and just those kinds of conversations, I'm wondering if you've been hearing kind of those concerns a little bit more acutely these days based off of maybe some of these lapsing issues that are happening, or if there's anything maybe even more broadly you want to say about the situation.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you brought that up, because after I retired from the Navy, after I spent 23 years there, I was at Quantico, Marine Corps Base Quantico, and the director of the Combat Operational Stress Control Branch, Captain William Nash, asked me if I'd get out of uniform and would come and work for him in the Combat Operational Stress Control Branch and help in devising programs for Marines that were going into combat and Marines that were coming back out of combat. And he particularly needed me on his staff because chaplains are at the front line in the provision of pastoral care, mental health care, with units. Very, very few Marine units have a dedicated psychologist. So I was involved with that with the Marine Corps for 2 years, and then I worked for the Department of Defense and provision of best psychological practices across all of the services. And I did that in the Defense Centers of Excellence for Psychological Health and Traumatic Brain Injury. Again, with the emphasis on working with the chaplains across all of the services, because the chaplains are at the front line often in the delivery of pastoral care and mental health services, when, again, psychologists are not assigned to many of those units. So that's kind of a long way of saying that I actually know a lot about this topic. And I am familiar with our Veterans Center here in Traverse City. They do excellent, excellent work with veterans and the family members who are receiving the type of continued and continuous care that is necessary for someone who's gone over into a combat setting and comes back with anxiety disorder, maybe substance abuse issues, certainly post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries. All of that needs constant and continuous care. And when that care is interrupted, what happens to the service member and oftentimes to the families is they suffer. And oftentimes they regress in their care plan and their treatment plan, and they're not getting better, they're actually getting worse. So we need these services up and running 24/7. And to say that we're taking care of our veterans when we shut down these services of provision of mental health care, not to mention the administrative services that some of the other offices do in the Department of Affairs. We're not taking care of our veterans. And along with that, we're not taking care of the family members when that happens.
Not just to, I'll ask another question also. Maybe this, I mean, this is kind of for any of the veterans, but maybe I'll ask Jim. I guess I'm wondering, when we think about like the range of federal programs that are available to veterans after they leave the service, I'm curious just like what's available, what maybe some of you have taken advantage of. And if some of those programming, obviously we've already kind of talked about the issues that are happening at some of these VA hospitals, but just even other kind of federal programs. And I'm just curious, like what's available for veterans and if some of that is being jeopardized by the shutdown.
Yeah, a lot of it is being jeopardized right now by the shutdown, and some of the cuts in the programs in there. I have veterans, or I know of a veteran that has served in both or in most of the Middle East, in both of the wars in the Middle East, and he suffers with hearing loss from the shells from the ships that going off and the constant running of the engines that were in there, the airplanes and the helicopters that they were around. And he's been struggling with getting health care, his hearing aids and his other ones in there. And with the shutdown has hurt him in getting that. He's still working through it, but they are working and he's getting some of it and some of the benefits, but it's harming him in a way that is preventing him from continuing his life in a normal fashion. So, yeah, we need him back up and running, and that we cannot cut the Veterans Administration down like it has been proposed, and then expect our servicemen and our veterans to thrive. So that's what I've seen.
Yeah, there's no way that you can cut services and still say that you're taking care of our veterans and their families.
Right.
Like I said before, if there is a break in care, especially in counseling care, or even in some cases psychiatric care, then that patient, the veteran, is really going to regress, and it does not help with them getting better. So, Jim, I just wanted to reiterate what you said.
And
Okay.
I don't have any follow-ups. I just wanted to note that I left my contact information in the chat for anybody who wanted to take it.
Thank you.
Sophia, do you have any questions? I see you there. Thanks for getting on,
Yes.
by the way.
Of course, yeah. I wanted to kind of branch off of that and talk about we just had some of these, off-year elections, and there were some really broad victories by Democrats in states all over the US. And so I wanted to ask here how you felt that these election results, how you feel they play into your campaign and your goals and kind of your hopes moving forward, especially with, initiatives like this and working with veterans.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I mean, we saw, last night in particular, those Democratic victories, but so much of this, I think, is beyond political party. This is about folks who see what's happening to folks they love, whether it's veterans or families on SNAP benefits or people who need health care and they're seeing their premiums go way up. And it's a response to wanting an affordable life, right? To be able to just have a shot. And so I think it's, for my campaign in Upper and Northern Michigan, it's encouraging because it shows that we can hopefully build that type of a coalition for people who just want to have a chance. Because really what's happening is the administration has put folks in a position with this government shutdown, which is an impossible place to be. Do you want to, if you're a federal worker, do you want to go back to work, or do you want to have health care for your community? Do you want to end this shutdown and not have health care, or do you want to eat? And the idea is, no, we need all of these things. We need all of these things, you know, and in the wealthiest country on earth, it shouldn't be negotiable that you can work hard and have a roof over your head. You can have food to eat and you can have health care. I mean, these are basic things, right? And we're looking at the greatest period of income inequality since the actually ever, more so than it was in the early 1900s, right? And I don't think there's people in my district who are going to be dancing in a $300 million ballroom to Great Gatsby, right? I've got people right now lined up around a United Way just trying to get food on the table. And so that fight for them, for our veterans, we got veterans on SNAP benefits, people who need mental health care, people who want to be able to go to the hospital, to be able to retire and rely on Social Security, to not have a letter saying their premiums are going up $80 a month and they can't afford it. I'm getting choked up, but I got people who aren't going to make it. And so this fight's so worth it. And I'm encouraged by what we see. I'm encouraged by last night, and I just want people to keep the faith, because this fight's about all of us. And, you know, our veteran community reminds us of that. It just does. It reminds us at the end of the day, we got to have each other's back, because we will rise or we will fall together. We just will. And my experience, my husband's a vet of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can tell you, when we are at the grave of a loved one, we're not asking, was he Republican or Democrat? We're not doing that. We're there for each other all day long. To me, that's what it means to be an American.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I know Callie pretty well, and Matt, and I know that Callie was at Camp Pendleton when Matt's unit was in the no kidding Battle of Fallujah. That Callie was back taking care of the wives at Camp Pendleton during a really, really difficult and chaotic situation. So I mean, I know that Callie has lived this from a personal standpoint. It's not just from an at-far observation. It's been a part of her life. And also, it continues to be a part of her life.
And if I could briefly chime in, I lost a very good friend on 9/11. He was working in the Pentagon. He was a briefer for the Chief of Naval Operations. And, you know, he'd just gotten done briefing the Chief of Naval Operations on, intelligence from around the world. He was sitting at his desk when Flight 77 slammed into the west side of the Pentagon. He was killed instantly. And, taking care of each other is something that I had to do in my career, because on 8 different occasions, I was a casualty assistance calls officer, meaning I was the person going to somebody's home to let them know that their brother, their sister, their mother, or their father had given their lives in the line of duty. Tough sledding, but it was what I was assigned to do, to take care of that family when they were facing, some of the worst news you could ever possibly get. And, people would say to me, Paul, how were you able to do that? And I said, I tried to flip it around and thought, what would it be like if my wife got a knock on the door and some Navy commander and a chaplain were there to inform them that I had been, that I had given my life for the country. That's what drove me. And it was one of service, and definitely one of, I said this earlier before you joined, Sophia, but, I fought with a very diverse group of people, and our diversity was our strength, because we pulled what was best from all these diverse people, and it took the best qualities of all of them to make us a better and stronger fighting force. And diversity was not a weakness. It was an absolute strength for all of us.
Yes, thank you all for sharing.
I don't know if there's any other questions from folks. If not, I will wrap. I will also send a video of this conversation, and a little bit to you all as well, and circulate that. But yeah, thank you to everybody who got on. Thank you to the reporters who got on. I know this week has been insane, so appreciate all your time. And to our speakers, thank you again for your service and the time that you've taken out of your day to share your stories. And everybody already knows I love my boss, so I don't need to say that out loud. So yeah. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.